check. I'm start recording now. I start making like a whole interview and then press record. So let's check that it doesn't happen again. May the fourth be with you.
Yes.
That's not the right.
I know.
But I didn't know you were a Trekkie.
Yeah, I like Star Trek too, of course. I don't like all of it. There's some I like the latest Discovery and Picard series. I didn't like them at all. I thought they weren't very good, but
well, I hear about that. I hear that Picard wasn't that good and Discovery wasn't that good. I saw all the first one, like the one with Kirk.
Oh yeah.
Then I see the New Generation. Then Deep Space Nine that I loved.
I agree. DS9 was awesome. I liked it too.
And then I start watching the cartoon, like the Star Trek,
which is also good.
It's also good, yeah. And I start to see reviews and other things about Star Trek, and I think that I'm not sure if I'm going to like the other shows.
Yeah.
Like Discovery.
I didn't like those. It's not my Star Trek. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah. Okay. Well, but enough about pop culture and Star Trek.
I can talk about that for days.
Well, I was expecting to find you with some kind of like Jedi robe or your Thor armor, because I'm going to put this in the video.
Well, you have to request that. I mean, I've got all kinds of stuff around me. If I'll show you just briefly.
Well, I cannot see because I'm looking at the Millennium Falcon, but.
Well, see, if I turn this up.
Whoa, that's much better, man. I mean,
there's my Indiana Jones hat. I've got about 5 or 6 of these hanging around my office.
I love it.
And up there, if I show you up there, like, there's my Thor helmet.
Oh, I love that helmet. I mean, you're a great cosplayer.
Oh, thank you. And one of my many Mjolnirs up there. There's my face hugger and other stuff. And so my geekness, part of the reason I like using a background is because during a Zoom meeting, I've often had people, like, we're in a serious meeting and they're like saying, hey, what is that thing back there? It looks like this or that. They're like looking at
and everything detours. But since we start just detouring, it's good to watch your actual background. I love it.
That's fine. I can.
That's like a big part of your persona, I guess.
Well, yeah, it is. I mean, this office. Well, what you can't see is this direction, and it's not quite done yet. But it's what I call my Thorner, where it's just like nothing but Thor stuff up on this side. But my camera obviously doesn't point that way.
Exactly. So, we just see a lot of Indiana Jones and some Thor. I think I love your Thor costume. I think you're a great Thor.
Thank you. It's super fun to wear.
Sometimes they made a Thor movie, a female Thor movie. You should be there.
Well, they are. The next movie, Love and Thunder, that comes out, I think in early 22. Natalie Portman, she's going to be back in the Thor franchise, and she's going to play the female Thor.
But you should make a cameo.
Yeah, I wish I could.
There's still time. There is still time. It's not out yet.
I wish. That'd be fun.
Okay, well, we met at Sweden Game Arena, right?
I think so.
I guess, well, I saw you there. You give a great lecture.
Thank you.
Okay, and I mean, everyone in the industry know you from one event or from other, from your time in India. How long is your career so far? When did you start in the game industry?
So actually, let's see. We're in May. It's May the 4th, but I started in April of 93.
I love that you remember the month.
I do, yeah. So I was working at Microsoft at the time, and so I've been working in the industry for about 27 years as of last month. And at the early stages back then, it was just a few things just to get started. But then once I was doing my what I called my geopolitical strategy team work at Microsoft and doing culturalization within the company across all Microsoft products. That included like all the Microsoft games. So I worked not only on Flight Sim, which was one of the first things I worked on, but I worked on, Halo and Fable and Age of Empires and Rise of Nations and Forza and all that stuff.
And what do you do exactly there? I mean, what is this? I mean, you're a cartographer, which is
yes,
like,
and a geographer, yes,
which is super cool and great to have people with the so diverse skill set in the game industry.
Yes,
and you ended Microsoft. And I read about this. I read about this like culturization.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember exactly the name of the team that you geopolitical.
It was called Geopolitical Strategy. That's the team I created. Yeah.
What was exactly what you were doing there?
So here's how it started. So I went into Microsoft. I was doing my PhD work in geography at the University of Washington here in Seattle. And they needed a cartographer to work on Encarta Encyclopedia. Now, a lot of people don't know about Encarta, except if you're older, but Encarta
I remember Encarta.
Yeah, which is great, because Encarta was the last major encyclopedia before Wikipedia appeared online.
Yeah.
And back in the day before Wikipedia, it's like everyone was using Encarta all over the place. And so for the very first version of Encarta, way back in 1991 is when they were starting this, they were looking for a cartographer to work on the maps for Encarta. And so I actually went over there, and I ended up being there as a contractor. And we had to create about 400 maps within about 4 months, which was insane amount of work. And so as a starving grad student who was recently married, I was just like, okay, well, I need the money and Microsoft pays well. So I was doing my PhD work, and I was doing all the map stuff for Encarta. So it was a very busy time. And it was really fun work. I mean, it's rare, especially when you're coming from such an academic field, that you get to apply your knowledge to something like this, like a digital product like this. It was really fun. And then they kept renewing my contract. Say, well, now we want you to work on the next version Encarta, and then they made me the cartography lead on Encarta, and then then the Encarta World Atlas product came out, and then they gave me a headcount position, so I basically put my PhD on hold, and then I said, okay, well, I'm just going to go down this Microsoft path for a little bit and see how it goes. Well, then eventually, Microsoft in 1997, there was this huge problem with Korea between two different products. And I won't go into all the details because it will take like an hour to explain it all. But basically, one product team, the Encarta World Atlas team, made a mistake in Korea, and we fixed it. And I was part of that team that got it fixed. Well, then 3 months later, Age of Empires came out, the very first Age of Empires, and they had some of the same problems in Age of Empires that we fixed for Encarta World Atlas. Now, the Korean government, they said, what the hell? We told you to fix it. And what they don't understand, of course, is that Encarta is made way over there on that side of the company, and Age of Empires is made completely different place.
Yeah. It's not in the same room.
Right, and there was no reason for these two teams to talk to each other and communicate. And so that gave me the idea when that incident happened. It was a very serious incident that got Microsoft in a lot of trouble in Korea. And that gave me the idea. That was my light bulb moment where I'm like, Microsoft needs a team internally that can manage this kind of information across every product group in every locale. And so I wrote a proposal, and it took me about 7 months to get it approved because I kept going to different VPs around the company, pitching my idea, and I got 4 rejections, and which was unfortunate, but I was persistent because I knew that they needed this. And so finally I got to a VP who approved it like within 5 minutes. And I think the reason he did is because he for one thing, he was from South Africa, not from the US, like all the other VPs. So he had a different cultural context for this kind of stuff. And his first question to me after I did my little 5-minute elevator pitch is he was like, I thought we're doing this already. And I'm like, no, that's why I'm here. And so he was very enthusiastic. His name was Paul Moritz. He was one of the VPs way back when at Microsoft. And so my team got created. And that's what I did for the next 7 years at Microsoft, was managing that team and building out this effort, and which became a company-wide mandate. And that team is still there to this day. So I'm really proud of that achievement.
Yeah, you should. And it's a really great anecdote because it shows that persistence is,
Yes.
and it's okay if you get rejected once. You can like go to different people, and at some point, if the idea is good, it's going to be approved. It's going to be implemented, and now, you made a lot of progress from that point, right?
Right. And I had a lot of conviction that I knew that they needed this idea. I knew that this was a risk that the company was facing because I saw it happen in numerous products. And so, eventually I was able to convince them. But that's actually how I started working on all the video games, is because even though I've been a gamer all my life, I never really aspired to work in the game industry. But in that capacity at Microsoft, running this geopolitical team, I had to work on all of these games. My job was to go in and actually look at the content. A lot of times it happened early on. So I would read the script, look at the concept art, kind of understand what kind of world are they building and who is in it and what happens there. And I could give them really good course corrections early on about cultural issues or potential political issues that could get the game in trouble in different markets around the world because of what was in the game. And so I would just kind of give them some little advice here and there. And sometimes, they didn't follow my advice, so we got in trouble. But eventually my team and myself, I think we gathered enough respect from the games folks to where they started listening, and they knew that we had their best interest in mind. We weren't trying to corrupt games. We weren't trying to dumb them down or make them politically correct. We were just trying to make the games be compatible everywhere as possible. And that's also when I found my true love. I had no idea, doing this culturalization work on games, that I would love it so much. And that's why I've been doing it ever since. Even though I've been active, running like the IGDA and now the Global Game Jam, which I love doing those things too. But I'm still doing my culturalization work because I love it. It's a lot of fun.
It sounds like a lot of fun. You have to check all the script of the game, see art, see that it fits.
Yeah.
I have no idea about cartography at all. I really don't know exactly. You have to check if the maps. You have to check if the maps are correct. That is pretty easy. But all the knowledge that you have to have.
Well, you want to do a quiz? Which flag is this?
I have no idea. Please stop. Please stop. I remember once I met a guy and he told me oh yeah, you're from Argentina. That's great. I wasn't there, but I was pretty close. I was in France. And I was oh, no, different continent.
That was the flag of Iran, by the way.
Okay, well, that shows how ignorant I'm about the world and about everything. But
see, geographic illiteracy is a common problem all over the place. People, they just don't teach geography the way they used to, and it's really unfortunate. And I don't want to go down a tangent on this topic because I can get angry and talk about this for days about how people are not taught geography, which, but it's a problem everywhere.
Yeah, I guess so. There are a few flags that I can say which country, and there are a few countries that I can name. So,
I'm sure.
Yeah. So I'm a dork. These are not bunny, they're donkey. So, but anyway, you were working after you work on Microsoft. You work in IGDA, right?
Well, what happened is I left Microsoft in 2005 with the intention of becoming a consultant because I felt that by that point, I felt like my work was done at Microsoft, and now I wanted to see how other companies could use my help. And so I created my company Geography and decided I'm going to be a consultant, which is a very challenging road for anybody to become an entrepreneur and to try and, convince other companies what you're capable of doing. So some of the early contracts I had were basically people who knew me from my work at Microsoft, which was great. But it was challenging. Every self-employed person knows this. It's not easy. It's always, you have a lot of ups and downs and a lot of challenges. So, but I loved it. I loved the freedom that came with being self-employed. And it just fits my personality a lot better. And
it was you alone as a consultant, or do you have like a team?
I have a few people who I call upon to help me every once in a while, but most of it is just me doing my work. But so when I left Microsoft, though, my intention was to work mostly on video games because that's what I knew I loved the most, doing culturalization on video games. And so that's why I joined the IGDA way back, I think in 2004, right before I left Microsoft, because I knew at the time it was a good place to get connected with the industry. And so I joined the organization, I got active in it, I created the localization special interest group in the IGDA because there wasn't one. I helped run the IGDA Seattle chapter. And then eventually in 2012, the board of directors approached me and asked if I would be interested in being the executive director and running the global organization. And to be honest, at the time, I was kind of dissatisfied with the way the org was going. So I said, yeah, you know what? I am interested in taking this job because I want to make things better. And so I did take the job, and I ran the org for 5 years and basically decided that my vision for changing the industry and making it better is going to have to be executed through a different path, not through running the IGDA. And but all during that time, I was still doing my culturalization work on the side. But, at that point, I'd been working with game developers for so long, and really the advocacy side of my career became more and more open and explicit, because that's why I took the IGDA job, because I want things to be better for developers. I don't want them to experience crunch. I don't want them, I want companies to respect them for the creative talent that they are. And I feel that a lot of companies still to this day have problems with that. And there's a lot of other problems too, diversity and inclusion and all these other issues. So that fire within me sort of ignited that, I want to find a way to help developers, not just through the culturalization work I do, which I love to do, but I wanted to do something more. And so that's why I went down the IGDA path and then left that to basically keep doing it on my own.
Yeah, I remember something that you said that really resonated with me. Like, this career, it's not like a sprint, but more like a marathon, that like you take it more lightly, so don't burn yourself up. I mean,
exactly.
How do you manage that?
Well, I think a lot of it is it's hard when you're in a creative media like games. And I know people in other creative media like film and television and writers and other areas like that, where it's hard because everyone keeps talking about the passion that we have for games. And it's true. We all have this burning passion for the medium. We love games and we love working on games, but passion has to be regulated. It's because it's a resource. And I know when you're young, a lot of people feel like that burning passion and desire is an inexhaustible resource. It'll never run out, but that's not true. And then you burn out. It's exactly. It's not true. As you get older, I'm in my mid-50s, and I know that as you get older, you get more tired of things. You get more, your patience gets a lot less and less for certain things. And so you want to sustain that passion over a long period of time. And if you just burn yourself out by diving in and working too much and not having a good work-life balance and not keeping care of your physical state, your mental wellness, you're going to get burned out. That's why a lot of people have shown that, the average game industry career is somewhere like around 5 to 7 years, which is really sad. That's not a career. That's a job that you had for 5 to 7 years. A career is something that you have for decades.
Yeah, exactly. And it's really, you can see developers that start to work full time because they get fired for some reason. And I guess that but the things that I find that really hard is like, okay, well, you have like all this passion to like make games, and you love making games, and you make games for your company. So you exploit yourself, you work on weekends because you really love the products that you're making. And it's really hard when your hobby is to make games and your work is to make games.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, see, when you have that level of passion, which many of us do in this industry, companies know this. And so that's why over the years, we've seen companies take advantage of that passion and basically exploit it. And I think they exploit it in a negative way. That's why you have things, especially in, certain places like North America, East Asia, and elsewhere, where you have these intense crunch cultures in some companies, which is getting better. I mean, it has slowly been getting better, but there are still times, and there's still examples where companies are pushing their people so hard and asking them for so much. And I'm like, is that the way you treat your absolute number one asset in your company, which is the creative talent? You don't treat them with that level of disrespect if you want them to stick around. But that's where, you have that problem with the perception of management, especially if management does not have any experience actually making games. They have not been there in the trenches making games over the years, because they may not understand exactly what it's like.
So what is your pinpoint definition, if there is one, of crunch? Because sometimes, it's like, no, crunch is working extra hours. Sometimes they tell you, no, crunch is working extra hours without getting paid. Or it's like, what is your definition of crunch?
Well, to me, crunch, there's two ways that I look at it. Crunch to me is when it's mandated from management top down. So it's when management comes to you as a worker in a game company and it says, we need you to work 12-hour days, 16-hour days, whatever, in order for us to meet this release date. That's crunch to me. And so that forces the people basically to make a choice that I'm going to have to tell my family or my partner or whoever, I'm not going to be able to see them very much for the next month or 3 months or 6 months or whatever the ridiculous amount is. So they have to make a choice. Do I want to stay in this job? I will, and the problem is you're right. A lot of times that crunch is not compensated either. So they're not compensated. They don't get paid overtime because they might be salaried. So if you're salaried, well, you're just working what you're expected to work. And so that's a problem as well. If you're under salaried contract and you don't have any stipulation for overtime, there should be, obviously, but sometimes there isn't. And it's just expected that you're going to work that hard because you're passionate. You want this game to come out just like everyone else does. But that's exploitation. The difference, though, that a lot of creative people have is it's what I would call groove, the creative groove. So I think everyone who's worked on a project, especially a creative project, but it's not just creative media, but we have a tendency as human beings, we'll get into a groove where we're working on something and we're just in that state of flow, as some people call it, where the ideas are coming, we're working hard, we're focused, and we just feel great because we're getting so much done. And we might be working for like 12 hours straight, without any break, and yet we just feel this energy because it's coming from us, and we're in that state of flow, in that state of groove. That's different because that's coming from you. That's coming from you, the creator. It's not being mandated or imposed upon you by management. And that happens every once in a while. Typically, we don't stay in that state of groove for very long, maybe for a day, maybe for a couple days. I know some writer friends who write books or they write screenplays, and they'll get in that state and they'll be awake for like 2 days straight, just writing, but then they collapse and sleep for 18 hours, and those little bursts of creativity are perfectly fine, and I think they're a very human thing to have happen. But when a company tells you, basically wants you to be in that state, mandated
for a year,
yeah, that is a huge problem, and that's where burnout comes from, like massive burnout.
Yeah, what is your suggestion, or you have some kind of exercise or an attitude that someone can have to last in the industry for a decade?
Well, I think there's a lot of great resources out there. I mean, part of it, one of the things I'll point to, and it's one of the reasons I sit on the board of takethis.org, which deals with mental health in the game industry, because one of the common things I saw in talking to literally thousands of developers around the world when I ran the IGDA, and still to this day, I still travel an extensive amount when there's no pandemics. And, I talk to developers all over the world. And one of the most common things I hear is the mental wellness aspect, is feeling the stress, feeling the pressure, not having an outlet for it, and not being able to cope with the mental impact of all of this pressure, and especially the mental conflict you have between being pressured to create and having that passion and desire to create. And so it's a really different dynamic, and having those two pressures against each other, it really affects a lot of people.
And the deadline that is coming slowly,
exactly,
and troubles that spark all over the place.
Exactly. And so organizations like Take This, and I'm also a patron of Safe in Our World, which is another mental wellness organization based in the UK. And both of these organizations are great at they have got resources on their websites. Like Take This, for example, back when I ran the IHDA, we did a white paper together called Crunch Hurts. And it outlines very clearly, and I encourage people to go take a look at this document on the Take This.
Because that's something that we made here. It's like,
yeah,
please, after this, will you send me all the links that you consider important, so everyone can check those links? So,
I will, absolutely.
I really think that it's really important to have like good practices for have like a healthy work environment.
I agree. So this white paper in particular, which is really useful, it basically shows you from a physiological standpoint how human beings cannot sustain crunch. We can last about 2 weeks. And after 2 weeks of that intense kind of work, the return on investment basically disappears very quickly. And this is across all human beings. It's not an issue of culture. It's not an issue of, it's basically our physiological ability to maintain that high level of physical activity and mental activity and to be focused. We only can last about 2 weeks. So basically, what is that saying? It's saying a company, if they're going to implement some kind of crunch cycle, the best they're going to get out of their employees is 2 weeks worth. And after that, there's no point in doing it for longer, because the people, they need a break. You have to recharge your creative batteries, so to speak, and you have to allow people to basically recharge. Now, I'm not advocating that companies should even impose 2 weeks of crunch. I think that's still wrong, because ultimately what needs to happen at the company level is that the company needs to adjust to the people. So, for example, I remember a time when I visited IO Interactive in Copenhagen, and one of the questions I asked at the time of the CEO who was there at the time, do you crunch here? And he said, well, no, we don't, but sometimes I wish we could, because we get a little behind on the schedule. But the reality is that the people there, they won't crunch, because it's not part of the culture. It's part of, and it's one of those cultural differences between like people in the US and people in Denmark, for example, is the Danish culture of work-life balance is far more secure and balanced than it is in the US, where we work ourselves to death. Whereas in Denmark, he said, like, they come in at 8 or 9 in the morning and they leave at 5 or 6, and nothing's ever going to change that. So he's like, I have to adjust the product release schedule to their work hours, because I can't, they're not going to crunch. And to me, that's exactly the right answer. The company and the management has to adjust to the people, not the other way around. That's the way it should be. And if a company can't set a realistic release date, well, then they need better product and project managers who know what they're doing. Because ultimately, that's really what it comes down to, is people who are ineffective at product management, and they just don't understand what a release schedule looks like. And so that's one point. But you asked a different question about how someone can have longevity in the industry. So do you want me to answer that one?
Yeah, I mean, I love, because it also, it were like two questions at the same time. Ones were like about longevity, and the other one was about like good practices and stuff like that. So yeah, please tell me about how did you manage. But that also, when we were talking, it sparked me the idea, like, what do you think about companies that like they have like this kind of like groove? They're trying to achieve this kind of groove state that you talk about, like having all kind of like recreative activities inside the company.
Yes.
So they make like a great human group. I mean, I think that's great. Like, they are friends and they like play ping pong and stuff like that, and they go to work. This is part of like good practice, or do you think it's not safe to like have this kind of like my life is inside of the company?
Well, yeah, I'll answer that second question first. So that is a double-edged sword. I think it's great when companies provide activities for when people want to take a break so they can go play games or watch something or relax. And I've seen a lot of great game companies provide these amazing public spaces, public inside their building, where the employees can go hang out and talk with each other, and they're really comfortable with nice couches and chairs. And I think that's really cool. And I'm glad they do that. But that being said, sometimes companies do that because they do want their workplace to feel more like home. And if especially with developers who may be young and single, if that can kind of entice them to stick around and say, well, why go home? Because you've got a nice kind of homey environment here. So why don't you just stick around here and work? What's the difference? And so I think you have to regulate that carefully. And I don't mean regulate like government. I mean, as a company, you should be watching for which employees are sticking around maybe too much, and encourage them to go home, and encourage them to say, hey, you've been here for 10 or 12 hours today, and we're not in crunch mode. So, maybe, I think it's time you go home. And that's a hard part, because especially younger developers are like, yeah, but I love doing this and I want to stay here and keep working. It's like, well, that's great, but there's always tomorrow, and there's always the next day and the next day. So this is kind of leads to the second question about how you maintain longevity. A lot of it comes down to you as the individual developer or creator. You really need to watch how your energy is being spent, because as much as you think, as I said before, that it's an infinite resource, it isn't. It's a finite resource, and eventually you'll start feeling that kind of dread when you, even for something you love like game development, you might start feeling that dread where it's like, I now I got to go back in and I got to give another 10 or 12 hours because that's what people expect of me. And you don't want to set yourself up for that kind of failure. So that's why you have to pace yourself. And it's like, yeah, you may be passionate about making games. That's great. Well, pour your 8 or 9 hours of passion into your workplace, and then go home. And if you've got like your personal project you're working on, that's great. Then you can work on that. Use the time that for yourself at home to you express that. You don't have to give it all to the company. You can do it in other ways, or you can mentor. You can mentor younger developers. You can reach out to kids groups or school groups. I know a lot of people in the industry.
And I love you're going in that direction, because that's where I want to go.
Good.
How do you manage to inspire other people? Because of course you're a source of inspiration for a lot of people, for a lot of women, for a lot of developers, and I really like your job. And well, part of this that we are doing here is try to encourage other people to join in. But how do we encourage other people to inspire and to lead as you do?
Well, that to me, this may sound like a trite saying, but to me, leadership is service. That's really what it is. It's like if you're in a leadership role, or if you aspire to be in a leadership role someday, leadership is about service. It's not about control. So if you want to be a leader, you show that you can be a leader by helping other people and by serving their needs. It's like if you're a manager in a company, your job is to oversee the needs of the people who are underneath you. It's not to force them to work to your desire and to your goal. Yeah, managers have goals and they've got, certain milestones they have to hit, but you don't have a whip. You're not whipping them into action. You have a shepherd's crook. You are guiding them into action, and you're not the one taking the glory for it. They're the ones taking the glory because they're the ones doing the work. Your job is just to make sure it happens on time and on budget, and you should be happy enough with that. And so to me, when you take on sort of a service mindset that your job as a leader is to help, I think the leadership part comes naturally. I never really tried to be a leader. I never went out of my way to say, I'm going to be a leader. I'm going to be in control. No, to me, it's always been about how can I maximize my ability to help people? And sometimes that means being in the position of leadership over an organization like the IGDA or currently the Global Game Jam, or other things that I've done in my career. It's putting myself in a position where I've got a scalability. So how my actions and the amount of time I spend on helping other people, how can I scale that to help as many people as possible, not just locally around me, but around the world? And so I think when we adopt that mindset of service, it becomes a lot easier, I think, because then you kind of naturally just help people who reach out to you. Now, that being said, you also, again, like I said earlier, you have to regulate the amount of time you spend, because for example, I get requests every day for help, for all kinds of things, for mentoring, for look at my resume, please. Can I talk to you about this? I want to discuss culturalization. I want to talk about labor issues in the game industry, over and over. And I'm really happy to get those requests, but I have to schedule those. Like, I'm like, that's great. I'd love to talk to you, but we're going to have to talk in like 2 months because I've got like no time between now and then. And so, because I want to help people, I'm not going to turn people away. I'm especially not going to turn away students and younger people who are starting out, but I have to regulate my time as well, because otherwise I could be spending 24 hours a day just helping people. And that's obviously not realistic.
You cannot be in all the places, not with focus. At least you can like reply like one word like yes or something to 20 people, but you cannot listen to them and actively help them.
Exactly. So, and I think sometimes that's part of the mindset is it's, even if you're not directly helping them, I think what's important is adopting the mindset that you're willing to listen. Even if you listen, that doesn't mean you've got a solution. It doesn't mean you might be the right person to help them. But a lot of times the people who are coming to me, they want or need somebody to at least listen to them and hear out what the problem that they're having. Now, a lot of times I can't directly help them, but I know people who can, and I can point them in the right direction. And so that's what I try and do, because I realize I don't know everything. I can't help everyone with every problem, but I can certainly try and be a facilitator to point them in the right direction.
Okay, that covers about how to lead people. But I also want to ask, how do we bring more people to the game industry? Because as you know, the game industry is growing and growing and growing.
Yes.
And we want more people to join in and help us make games. Because
yes,
we are not going to be able to make all the games that we want to make. And how do we bring more people to the industry? How do we bring more of every kind of like ethnicities and genders? And I mean, how do we can like bring people to the game industry?
Well, I think there's a couple ways we do that. I mean, one thing we do know is that is happening naturally right now. It may not be happening as fast as some of us would like, but it is happening because we've seen over the last several years the amazing level of democratization of game tools, like free versions of Unity and Unreal and all these other game engines out there that people can just right now, they can go to these sites and download them and start making games. There's tons and tons of tutorials out there on YouTube and elsewhere. So, and I've run into so many people around the world in my travels who are self-taught, who downloaded Unity or some other software. They looked at YouTube, they spent hours and hours watching videos, and they have been making pretty amazing games all on their own. They did all the coding, they did all the art themselves, they even did the music themselves. And that takes a lot of passion and drive to do that. But we are seeing that happen. And the important thing is because the game engines and all of these things are becoming more democratized and the knowledge is becoming more available, that opens up game creation to a much, much wider audience and a far more diverse audience than ever before. And that's why it's really exciting to me, especially in the indie game space, to see the kind of amazing games coming out of that space, because that's where, to me, a lot of the innovation in games is happening right now with game design and the different themes that people are using. And a lot of that is because we're seeing a lot more different people, a lot of more underrepresented people out there making games from their specific cultural perspective and making it about themes that come from different cultures around the world. Now, so that is kind of happening naturally already, but that's actually one of the reasons why I took this opportunity to be the executive director of the Global Game Jam, because the Global Game Jam is this remarkable global scale event that encourages education in games and gets people started. A lot of people have started their game career at the Global Game Jam. So you think about in 2020, when we did our event back in January, we had over 48,000 people at 934 sites in 118 countries make over 9,600 games in one weekend. And I mean, that kind of power, and a lot of these people this is the first time they've ever been involved in game creation. And that's kind of that spark. That's how it starts. And so my point in organizations like the Global Game Jam is you have to make available the chance to actually do it and to have that experience.
Yeah, here in Cordoba, we got 10 years, and you said you made a great video about this, and it's a really great event to start, like making the first steps towards joining the game industry, because you meet other people maybe with more experience that, as you said, they can point you in the right direction, or ask this, or go through this, check this tutorial. Right. So you are part of the Global Game Jam. And do you have any good statistics or insight about how groups evolve on or develop or become successful? If there is if the group is big, it's probably this is going to happen. If the group is small, probably this is going to be the outcome. Or if you have metrics about what happens inside that you can share.
You mean groups as far as what? As far as game development teams or communities?
About communities and game development teams.
Well, I think, on the game development side, I have no magic answer, because I know a lot of people wonder, how many people do I need to create the game that I have in my head, this vision I have for creating this really cool game? How many people am I going to need? Well, I mean, there is no magic formula for that, because it all depends on the skills that you have. It depends on the skills of the people who are already involved. I mean, I've seen some remarkable, amazing games made by one single person, but that's a rare thing. I've seen really amazing games made by 2 or 3 people, and I've seen really awesome games made by 1,000 people, as we've all seen. So that's kind of open-ended. But as far as a community goes, like getting a good community started at a local place, which I do think is really essential. I think it's really important for game creators to connect with each other. It can be virtually on Discord or Slack or something, but ideally having that chance to come together locally and share with each other, like, here's what I'm working on, or here's I've got questions about game development or something like that. I think that's really important. And getting that community started, a lot of times that community starts at a school or university where people are learning about game development, because you've got colleagues around you who are all interested in the same thing. And so there are a lot of times at universities there will be like game clubs or some other kind of student-run organization where they can all get together and talk about these things. On the industry side of it, it's a little bit tougher, because once you take a job somewhere, we get busy. We get super busy. And yet I still feel it's very important when you're in the industry, you still should be talking to other people, and you should still be collaborating, because one of the biggest problems I've seen with some developers out there is that they assume that once they leave school and they get their game industry job, that they don't really need to learn much anymore, which is ridiculous. I mean, because game development and game creation is constantly changing. We're constantly coming up with new ways of doing it, with new tools, and we're adapting to technological changes as well. And so I think we should always be learning. And so I think it's important to, even for professionals, to be connected with some kind of local community. And if there isn't one, then I would encourage them to try and start one. And that basically can start with just taking the colleagues right around you and say, hey, let's decide to meet like every week or every month on this night at this time at this place, and let's get together and just talk about game development, and think about topics you want to ask each other about, and just kind of see how that grows.
So you think that's a great like starting point, like universities?
I think so, because Yeah, and I do think so, because that's where you know, in a university environment, that's where you're kind of burning with that interest and you've got that passion for creating games. And I think it's a great environment in which to foster that idea that you should be talking with each other. And honestly, this is one of the core reasons I love working in the game industry, because pretty much everywhere in the world I go, game developers and game creators, they love talking with each other and sharing. You know, it's sure, it can be competitive sometimes, but not that much. I mean, when it comes to actually talking shop with each other, I mean, I've seen super famous developers who are very successful, you know, talk with, you know, an up and coming student and just share with them all their ideas and insights about game design and all that. And the fact that kind of connection happens, and a lot of it is because those of us who've been around in the industry, again, we all love what we do, and we love helping others understand what we do. And we love, you know, sharing with each other. And I think it's one of the things I really love about this industry.
Yeah, and I love that you say that, because my next question was, what's the thing that you love the most about the game industry? And you already answered that, I guess, or there's something else that you want to pinpoint about this industry.
Well, I think I would say, I mean, just to reiterate what I just said, I mean, I think the thing I love the most about the industry is the people, of course, because as one of the things that I keep telling people, especially when I give lectures about my advocacy work, you know, a lot of developers, especially when they get angry about something, they'll curse about the industry. This industry is screwing me over. This industry makes me angry. And we often have to remind ourselves that industry means people. It's not some magic black box, some evil big thing that cranks out games. The industry is made up of every one of us. We are the industry, and we are, you know, the elements that make up that industry. And so if something within the industry makes you angry, well, think about the people dimension of it. Like, who is making you angry, or what did they decide, or what has been implemented by a company? And, you know, so we have to kind of never forget that we are interacting with other people all the time. It's not some angry, evil black box. It feels that way sometimes because, you know, a lot of times a lot of decisions are made kind of behind the facade of a company, but reality is that it's always people making those decisions. So we have to remember that. But that is what I love about this industry, because I have run into some of the most amazing human beings, so creative, so passionate, from all kinds of backgrounds, from all over the world. And I just love it, you know. And to me, it's just that incredible difference between everybody who has been united, though, by that central love of games, is a dynamic that just drives me, and I really enjoy it. And of course, yeah, I love working on the games, and I love the games themselves too. But you know, I never lose sight of the fact that we're dealing with people, and that's what makes it fun.
Yeah, but yeah, I agree with you. People is the most amazing thing that this industry have. You make friends so easy. You go to events. Yeah. And then things like you meet each other. Then again, you meet new people. But then you meet your old buddies from the conference, and you have a great time. And everyone is so open, as you said. And then that's amazing.
And it shows through in a lot of the big industry events that we go to. Of course, not this year, but
not
typically
this year at all.
When we have events like GDC or E3 or Gamescom, and one of the reasons, I mean, yeah, they can be super busy for all of us because we're running around to meetings and doing business and everything. But what I love about it is that these big events are a family reunion every single time, and I really look forward to seeing a lot of familiar faces from around the world and being able to give them a hug and say hi and catch up with them, and of course meet new people too. And it's that family reunion feel that really, you know, that's what I love about it.
Yes. I mean, it's amazing. The events, going to events, it's amazing. Not only as a business point of view, but also as a personal point of view, that is the most important part. Then, because
I agree.
In the end, you can always make business through emails and send presentation and stuff like that. But there, you can hug, as you say. That I think it's as an Argentinian hugger, I think it's very important. And the last, I would like to go back to a question that I made earlier. It's how do we manage to have more women joining the industry? Because we have more men than women, and that's evident. And I could not pinpoint the reason myself. Like, this is for this. I don't know if we are not advertising like well enough the game industry, or that we are terrible people. But we are. I mean, as we said before, the game industry people it's good. I mean, we want more people to get in. Where are we failing?
Well, I mean, yeah, this is a big topic. I mean, the industry on average is about 20% women around the world, give or take, depends on the location. Some people, they compare us to the general tech sector where the numbers tend to be lower, like 10 to 15%. And so sometimes people will see that comparison. They'll say, well, hey, the game industry is doing better. Well, 20% is not great.
Not good enough, right?
I mean, it's like, it's like, especially when we know that there's basically gender parity out there with those who are playing games. And so, as I've said before, it's like really our goal needs to be that those who make games better reflect those who are playing games. And so we on the industry side have a long way to go to still get to that point. The democratization of the technology that I mentioned earlier is helping in this. We're seeing a lot more diversity and a lot better gender representation in indie developers and younger people these days. But there's a lot of other issues that are kind of systemic to the industry side of it that we've seen in different corporate practices that have not been beneficial towards favoring diversity and inclusion. And, I think a lot of companies they're understanding that. They're trying to do a lot better at that. We've seen some improvement over the recent years in those efforts, but we still have a long way to go. I mean, there's multiple problems that we're dealing with, though. I mean, one is the history of the game industry itself, which came out of the tech sector, back in the and there's my somebody wants to join the conversation.
Hello, what's the name of the
and his name is Thorin from Thorin Oakenshield from The Hobbit. So go away. So there's the fact that the game industry came out of the tech sector, which back in the 60s and 70s was very male dominated. And so we kind of brought that culture a little bit with us when the game industry got created, even though a lot of the early designers and creators of games, way back when were women. But it's only now that they're getting a lot of the recognition that they deserve. And and then a lot of people will pivot it and say, well, one of the reasons why is because back in the 80s, Nintendo specifically started gearing a lot of their marketing towards boys and not instead of just, general boys and girls. And so when they did that pivot, some people feel that was something that was very detrimental because then it made games feel like if they were mainly just for boys. And of course, if you're a girl growing up and you're like, well, I like games, but, and then, but I'm not supposed to play them? Is that the message here? I'm not supposed to create them? There's other cultural factors too, of course, like in some conservative cultures around the world where there's a lot of parent pressure or teacher pressure where, boys become engineers and technology people, but girls do other jobs. That's not jobs.
But then again, I mean, other jobs, let's say other jobs, we need a lot of talent of every field.
Well, yes, we do.
I mean, we need artists, writers.
But see, that's part of the perception problem in this industry, though, is that I talk a lot about this when I've done various interviews, is that, you're looking at a geographer who's made a career in video games. So if I can do it, anybody can do it. Anybody can find a place in this industry if I can. And so there's a lot of skill sets that are not directly related to programming or art or even writing that are necessary in this industry. So that's one of the areas where I really encourage young people, if you have an interest like a social science background, like psychology, sociology, things like that, that is also very necessary. For example, the user experience people, the experts in user experience today come from a background of mostly psychology, and they understand psychology really well because they have to. They have to understand how human beings interact with information and how they perceive it. And so there's all these other skill sets that are necessary. And so I think that's another message that's very important to spread, is getting people to understand you don't just have to be a programmer. You don't just have to be an engineer. There's many other talents that are necessary in the game industry.
And we need them all.
We need
I want all the people joining the game industry. I mean, if you're watching this and you want to join the industry, come on, there is a place for you.
Yes, it's like we want
you exactly on the game industry.
That's right, and we do. So we really encourage people.
It's true. I mean, it's true. In the global game jam, I mean, there you can see. I mean, if you are not participating in global game jam next year, you do it, and you are going to be done.
Well, and even so, if someone watching this is younger than 18 years old, I mean, we do an event in July called Global Game Jam Next, which is for 12 to 17-year-olds. So that event...
Global Game Jam is not for under 18 years old, right?
Exactly. So we have this other event, Global Game Jam Next, which we always do in July. So we're doing an online version of it this year. Okay. So I really encourage people. We're actually going to be making our announcement this week about this year's event. And so I really encourage people.
Already, like before the announcement, can we have more? That's great.
So it will be in July, and people will be able to sign up online to run a site and to be a mentor and to help out. And so that's coming up in a couple of months. And that's for people who are younger who are really interested in game creation, this is an awesome opportunity to learn, because there will be educators with curriculum, and they'll teach you, and then you'll have a chance to actually make a game. So it's be really cool.
Yeah, we need more younger people joining in, because they are going to be making great games in the future. And educators make a great part here. They are in the trenches.
Yes, and like you said, we need better representation. So we need more girls. We need more underrepresented people taking part in this, because there is a huge area of untapped creative genius out there in all of these other people. And so we need you desperately. Yeah,
we need you desperately. That's true. Last question, and I promise this is the last one. Some links that you want to share that you think that if you are starting, please check this. Mm-hmm. And of course, the others that you said about good practices.
Yes.
We're going to add them, but these are not those links, just another one.
Super.
Go. I mean, what links do you recommend?
Oh, you're asking me. I'm
asking you.
Off the top of my head, I would have to compile a list. I mean, there's so many. Okay. There's so many resources out there.
Okay, this is going to be a long list then.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of resources out there for where you can get started and how you can kind of start exploring this. Game creation. To me, there is no necessarily one perfect place to start.
Yeah, of course. I mean, okay. Well, I wait for those to add them.
Okay. Yes.
I think that's it. There's something else that you want to talk that I didn't ask you, and you want to add this?
No, I think we covered pretty much a lot of different stuff.
I'm really happy with the talk that we have. May I see you with the helm, with the Thor helm?
You want me to put on my Thor helmet?
Please.
Okay,
I want to take the picture. I mean, I'm having bunny ears. Come on.
Here we go.
Here we go. That looks so great. I mean,
okay.
You look, I mean, now you cannot hear. Okay,
there.
It's so great. I mean, that's a great tour.
Thank you.
My God, I love it. That's so cool. I mean,
with my newer Thor helmet, because now I wear the Jane Foster Thor cosplay. This is my old Thor helmet, so I don't wear this very much anymore. Actually, this is the first time I've put this on in quite a while. So
I hope you don't start sneezing. Maybe it has a lot of dust on it.
No, I won't start sneezing.
Okay, well.
But it's not the kind of thing. It's actually fairly heavy, so it's not the kind of thing you would wear. I mean, I've worn it all day for cosplay. But yeah, it's after a while you're kind of be going.
Okay. Just for a moment. It's just for the picture there. Well, thanks a lot, Kate. It was super cool to talk with you. Let's hope we inspire other people to join in the industry. It was great to talk about France with you also. And I hope to see you again when events come again. Who knows which year? Let's hope
it'll happen. I'll see you again soon.
See you again soon. Well, that's it. Thanks a lot for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Goodbye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Ending here.